minute of a day to guide from the bottomless pit, but my aim was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help the sing? These songs of freedom is all I ever had. Redemption song, redemption song. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Number two ourselves can free our mind. I've no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. Our love shall kill our prophets while we stand aside and look. Some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you ask the same? These songs of freedom is all I ever had. Redemption song, redemption song, redemption song. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Number two ourselves can free our mind. Whoa, I've no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop off the time. Our love shall kill our prophets while we stand aside and look. Some say it's just a part of it. We got to fulfill the book. Won't you ask the same? These songs of freedom is all I ever had. Redemption song, all I ever had. Redemption song, songs of freedom, songs of freedom.
Welcome back to the Professor Penn podcast. David Penn here. This is episode 96, Truth and Freedom. Truth and Freedom. Every time we run music, we never know if it's going to get on. We open with Bob Marley, a beautiful song, redemption song. If it's not there, we had to cut it out because we couldn't get it up. If it's there, wow, those lyrics, I urge you to go back and study them. It's interesting to me that I meet people that have never heard of Bob Marley. Just recently I met somebody who didn't hear of him. And we want to take I want to take, use that we, cognitive distortion. Forgive me. I want to take and promote the lyrics and the ideology that Bob Marley brought to light when I was young. I mean, in the 60s, I knew Bob Marley before anybody else knew him, I knew who he was. I don't know why. I just did. I think because Rastafarianism is essentially an Old Testament or has Old Testament roots, and the tonalities and the formation of the music and the scales, the keys, they're very, well, I resonate with it because it's familiar to me. And, when I was looking across the range of music that was available at that time, this caught me in the heart. And I've always been a big fan of Bob Marley and I actually studied his lyrics. And, none but ourselves can save ourselves. You know, we had caucus night here last night in Minnesota. That means all Minnesota citizens had an opportunity to practice self-governance, to go to their local school or community center and sit in a room with the people in their neighborhood and elect delegates to their conventions, to elect precinct officers to discuss party business. It's something that is truncated away. It's just been diminished over time, and it's part of the scam that we're living in. We're also focused on the presidential election. Oh, Biden, Trump, that's everything. Look over here. Look at this election. That is a diversion. It was never supposed to be this way. The founders, the framers of this country did not envision an imperial presidency or an emerald city which ruled over all of the people of the country. They left us with a framework of self-governance. What does self-governance mean? It means that if we govern ourselves, we need very little external government. If I can govern myself internally, self-governance, spiritual borders, who needs somebody to rule over me? I know what to do. And everything about the last 111 years, since 1913, has been aimed at destroying that impulse for self-governance, which is rooted in Christianity, which the Darwinists, the materialists, the Marxists hate. And everything that's gone on in this country for 111 years has been a systematic unwinding of what the framers created for us. Was not defended. So when I take, responsibility as a boomer, like it all happened on my watch, that's just taking responsibility. That's not really true. This thing has been unwinding for 111 years. On a very recent podcast, I read President Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, his end-of-life regret about signing the legislation which gave birth to the Federal Reserve in 1913. He already knew by the time he had died, just before he died, he knew that he had turned the self-governance of the country over to a handful of oligarchs who have been passing down from father to son through secret societies, a strategy of subjugating we the people. And I just want to say, go to caucus. The caucus attendees do not understand this, generally speaking. My particular caucus room was well attended. We elected a full slate of precinct officers. We elected 4 delegates, and we had 2 alternates, which was the full slate. That was what needs to happen in all 4,000 precincts across the state of Minnesota and across the entire country. And if the American people don't want to self-govern, guess what's going to happen? We're going to be governed. It's a very simple choice. It's an A-B choice. You either self-govern or you're governed. Now, what are we finding out? People want to be governed because it's easy for them. Self-governance requires work, contemplation, study, focus, all the key concepts that we've talked about, endurance, patience, focus. You got to work at self-governance. But being governed is easy. You sit on the couch, you watch Fox News, and you complain. Oh, that's a great strategy. And I think this audience is liberated from that, and we want to go out and liberate more people from it. And how do we do that? We form a community. I hold political meetings in Minneapolis here that were really quite successful. Somebody sent in, please change the Professor Penn podcast ad art because half my face is gone. It's like a one eye. Maybe that's a little Masonic. And I want to tell you, that has nothing to do with it. That was an artist, and I wasn't thinking. That was a good comment. That was a great comment. And in a very similar fashion, in the secret society of the Republican Party, I started to hold these classes, and I called them the master classes, because if I called them the precinct strategy, I knew they were going to get immediately onto me. And someone likewise said, is that some kind of Masonic secret society thing? I said, no, it's just a master class. Don't get so serious. I'm just a guy. But I held these master classes, and they were well attended. And the first time, maybe we had 30 people there. And I said, everybody bring one person to the next class. And then we had 60. And we had another class. And the classes were just like this. I mean, it was the same. Those master classes were really the proto Professor Penn podcast. I used multimedia. I talked about events, but I did it in person, peer to peer. And we had 60. I said, next time, everybody bring a new person. Well, we didn't get 120, but let's say we got 80 or 85 people. And we kept expanding the base because the people that were attending the event saw value, and they knew that we were doing something that was not just entertainment, that we were really trying to form a movement. And when we got up to 140, 130 people, whatever the number was, the Republican Party intervened and shut it down. The head of the party sent a message. His name is David Hand, the Hand Man, the chairman, who was given Free People Radio a great compliment. He started his own podcast. We'll see what kind of juice he has. We'll tune in and see if he's got something new to say. Anyhow, he sent the message, we don't want people meeting from different districts. Stay in your lane. In other words, our state is divided into 67 districts, and they didn't want people meeting across district borders because as long as we're separated into cantons, we can't organize ourselves. So they didn't like that. And then we had Mr. We Don't Need Any More Republicans, Chair Randy Sutter of Congressional District 3 here in Minnesota. And he just right to my face told me, I don't want you to do this anymore. I said, we're doing this to get more Republicans, more people involved in party politics. We don't need any more Republicans. We just need more work from the Republicans we have. And I didn't understand it at the time because, Professor Penn is such a naive and good-hearted person. It never occurred to me that these people were trying to stay in power because I had this Pollyannish view of the parties that they were open for the American citizens to express themselves politically, and then we had votes, and those votes determined the future of the party. And that's true, but the votes are controlled by what's called parliamentary procedures. All those procedures are controlled by party insiders. They change the rules to make it harder to change things. These people are just staying in power. And who are they? This is going back to Ty. Ty, this time it's not the Jews, okay? These people are Protestant, white, Christian, 501c3 Christian Minnesotans who control the Minnesota Republican Party. I know from personal experience, many of them are racists and some of them are anti-Semites. That's my opinion. If you're listening to me and you're in the party and you don't like it, too bad, because I was personally attacked in a very anti-Semitic fashion on several different occasions. So no one has to tell a black person when there's racists in the room, they can feel it. And nobody has to tell a Jewish person in the room when there's anti-Semites in the room, because we can feel it. And if we're too sensitive, too bad. Adjust the way you talk to me. Don't say I'm ambitious as a code word for say when people say I'm ambitious, you're darn right I'm ambitious. I'm ambitious to change this country and overthrow their business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy. Yes, I'm ambitious for that. But what they were really saying when I was ambitious was, he's a kike. Another guy called me a liberal, a leftist, which is another way of saying kike. They just didn't have the balls to say it to my face because they know Professor Penn is serious about, my borders. I have spiritual borders. Don't breach my borders. Or as Elvis Presley so beautifully sang, you can do anything you want, but don't step on my blue suede shoes. Great song if you never heard it. You know that song? Oh, Mr. Producer knows that song. That's great. So we had this meeting. It was great. People came out, and we had candidates present, which was fantastic. And we had, before the caucus, we had a guy there who's running for Senate here in Minnesota trying to get endorsed by the Republican Party, and he's running for Amy Klobuchar's seat, and his name is Smokin' Joe Frazier. Smokin' Joe. Smoking Joe stood up there and he said, I spent 20 years in the military, and based on that, the most important thing to me is our security. And number two, we got to get our spending under control. Obviously, he's stupid or he thinks I'm stupid. Somebody's stupid. Somebody has to be stupid because we can't continue to maintain our current security architecture. And Smoking Joe bragged that he'd been to 100 countries around the world. That's very impressive in the Navy. He's been to more countries than I have. I've been to a lot of countries, not 100. But then again, I wasn't on the payroll of We the People sailing along on a warship. But anyhow, his comment was we have to maintain our security and protect the United States of America, and we got to get our budget under control. How's that supposed to work? Who's taking the haircut on that deal? So I thought that was kind of crappy. And then he made the comment that he worked for a major financial institution, which is perfect, because who's financing this whole deal is the major financial institutions. So we got a candidate. This is right out of the traditional we're going to lose playbook of the Minnesota GOP. We have an unappealing candidate who has a very not thought through political platform, who works for a bank, and he's going to run in Minnesota, which is basically a leftist state. Ha, ha, ha. Good job. And then we had caucuses, and it was very interesting. It was very uplifting. Now, there was a lot of negative chatter from the chattering class, the pundits, that get on X and say, oh, nobody showed up. Nobody showed up in your room, Dustin. In my room, we had a full slate of people. That's the difference between talking and acting. We got an activist that's in my precinct, whose name I will not mention, who's a stud, a hero. And he's making it easy for me to stand up here and do my thing. We're forming a political action community in SD 45. We intend to be an example, a beacon for the nation. And I want to thank everybody in SD 45 that showed up, even the people that hate me, because you have the right and the responsibility to self-govern, and I don't need to agree with you. I respect you. I know you don't respect me. In fact, again, we got that same lady with that bony finger. When Royce White came, our erstwhile compatriot here on Free People Radio who's running for Senate, he came and addressed the crowd afterwards. And boy, was that interesting, because Royce gave them a full-throated America First address. And he was quite charismatic and quite likable. Quite likable. And he had more than half of that audience enthralled. Enthralled. And you should have seen those traditional white Protestant members of the party who are military-industrial complex toadies, the people that control the party. They were pissed. The look on their faces was class. If you're watching me, I'm sorry. Learn to keep your emotions inside yourself. If you don't want me to know how unhappy you are to see how the party is changing, just smile. Then I don't know. In fact, you could have come up and actually been part of it, and we would have never known that you were an outsider. We want everybody to participate in three ideas. We do not think these ideas are polarizing. Even Smoking Joe said we got to fix our border. Okay, great. Smoking Joe and I agree. We have to restore our borders, both physical and spiritual. We agree. Fantastic. He talked about the debt. We want to turn $34 trillion of public debt into private assets. Hey, I'd like that $34 trillion in my bank account. Where's that money going? Who's getting the benefit of that debt? And I got something to say to those people. You put your pants legs on just like every other American citizen. You wipe your ass like every other American citizen. Rothschild, the head of the Klan, just died. You die like every American citizen. Why do you have to be an asshole between birth and death? Why not rethink what's going on? Listen to the will of the people. We saw it in SD 45, which is the most mainstream, traditional Republican district in Minnesota. You couldn't get any more anti-Trump, anti-American first than SD 45, and over half that crowd was really resonating with Royce. It was fantastic to see. So the intelligentsia, the PhDs, the secondhand jerk-offs, and the leaders of the party take note, the will of the people be done. That's why we have a republic with a process of democratic voting. Okay, I said nothing. Ha ha ha. See, because we're an underground communication here. We've got to use our head because we don't want to get clipped. So Royce did a great job, really brought the room a great deal of energy. It was a very successful night, and I wanted to share that with you. I'm very happy about it. I want to thank, as always, Free People Radio for giving us this platform. We have got great producers. We got a new line producer in here that we're working with. He's going to be a keeper. This guy's great. Pretty soon we're going to get the mic on him. Boy, you're going to get an earful. And we want to thank Dan Schultz, PrecinctStrategy.com. Want to always thank Dan. Dan's checking in. Dan is one of those pathfinders, pace setters, the guy out on point that's been identifying for the American people the importance of self-governance. Thank you, Dan. We love you. Now, when we have an event like this, and it's a successful event where we come together, there's all these people that are going to say, oh, it's not this, it's not that. You know what? I'm thankful for what we have. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for our American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your only begotten Son to die on the cross, that I might be saved. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. And I believe that I've received health for all my flesh. For those of us who are struggling with infirmity, with disease, mental, physical, spiritual, thank you, God and King of all worlds, for restoring health to all my flesh. Thank you, God, for restoring health to all my flesh. Thank you. I do want to say that while I'm caustic about the anti-Semitism and racism that I see in the Republican Party, the party of freedom, the party of Lincoln, the party of spirituality, of human freedom and human well-being, why I reject and I see that materialism, that Darwinism, that one race is superior and another is inferior within members of my own party. It's very few people. Most of the people are wonderful, and I urge you to come into party politics. And the more American citizens that come in, everyday people of good cheer, of goodwill, the party participation will get better and better. We want unification, not division. But we need to isolate the people that believe that one race is superior and another is inferior. They're Democrats. They need to go caucus with the Democrats because that's what the Democrat believes. You know, I'm watching, we got this new thing. Oh, the Ron DeSantis people will never vote for Trump. Okay. And they're serious about it. Now, I don't know if the Ron DeSantis voters are serious, but the paid influencers that are on the payroll of the security state that want to sow division are saying that Ron DeSantis people will never vote for Trump. So this is what this means to me. We've got leftists, we've got conservatives, and we've got nationalists. And the conservatives are not going to vote with the nationalists They're going to vote with the leftists. And what does that make them? That makes them leftists, which makes a lot of sense because they judge the success of their politics by the size of their 401k and the prowess of the U.S. military. That's why they like Ron DeSantis in his Navy garb. These people are they don't know they're leftists. They think they're conservatives. But Alexander Dugin, who's a great political philosopher from where? From that horrifying Russian country, which me even talking about it, these people are going to say I'm a traitor. No, I read philosophy. I read Confucius. Does that make me a traitor because I read Chinese philosophy? I guess it does, doesn't it, for you folks? Like if I don't just stay in the post-World War II Democrat liberal order cult, if I leave that cult and do any other research, I'm a traitor to the cult. Well, I guess if you're a cultist and you're a secondhand jerk-off coming out of our dirty dozen elite institutions and you're calling everybody else a cultist, that's because you've read Saul Alinsky and you always call other people what you are yourself. You're a cultist. You don't look outside the box that some secondhand jerk-off taught you, which actually would make you a third-hand jerk-off. So what we have is Dugin addressing that conservatism was always a scam, that there's only liberalism. And if these people are going to follow through and vote with the leftists instead of the nationalists, you're just proving Dugin the Russian correct. So make a decision and live with your decision. I'm not asking anybody to like Trump. I've said on here, Trump's not my cup of tea. The ideas is what I'm focused on. So everybody goes, hey, he's this, he's that, label, orange, ugly, fat. I mean, these people come up with, everything is about taking our focus off of the idea. And what's the idea? A border. The debt. Oh, Trump ran up the debt. Yes, he did. Do you remember COVID? We had a national emergency. He did run up $8 trillion of debt. He owns that. Let's see how he performs the next time. I'll trust a businessman dealing with debt before I'm going to trust a secondhand jerk-off because a businessman knows how hard it is to make money. A secondhand jerk-off really never worked in his life or her life. And what did Trump do? He gave us 4 years apiece. We've had these leftists in here now for 3 years. We got 3, and Roy said this was hilarious. Remember the movie The Princess Bride? Never fight a land war in Asia. Well, the Ukraine is Asia. The Middle East is Asia. And the South China Sea is Asia. These secondhand jerk-offs have got us going to war at 3 locations in the Eurasian continent. Okay, great. No wars under Trump. I'm not saying like Trump or dislike Trump. Do you want peace? Or do you want war? If you want war, you know what wells up inside me is swear words? And I'm going to tell you what. Enrollment in the U.S. military is down 5%. 5%. They're having a hard time filling out the billets in the military. You know what the military does when they can't fill their ranks? They reinstitute the draft. So all you people that think you're conservative and you have beautiful 20-year-old, 25-year-old kids and you think they're safe and you got your 401k and you got your $1.5 million house with the swimming pool and the BMW and the Mercedes in the garage and it's all good. They're going to draft your kids and they're going to die fighting these wars. So if you believe in it that much, I salute you. If you don't believe in it that much, it's time to really take a look at where the leftists are taking us. Where are the leftists taking us? I want to read a few things about unity because we have a problem with unity. We're not unified, right? We hate each other, and we're made by professionals to hate each other. And when I say professionals, I mean graduates of our elite dirty dozen institutions who are second-class jerk-offs. They're making us hate each other. Let's look at it over history. By faithfulness, we are collected and wound up into unity within ourselves, whereas we had been scattered abroad in multiplicity. St. Augustine, what a beautiful comment. He's talking about self-governance. When we discover faith, we become wound up into a unity. You know, when you discover the search for truth, the search for division falls away. So all these people that are preaching division, they really haven't gotten there yet, or they never intend to get to the place where they're searching for truth. They don't do it. Here's another one. A little bit of a different flavor. I hate imperialism. I detest colonialism. And I fear the consequences of their last bitter struggle for life. We are determined that our nation and the world as a whole shall not be the plaything of one small corner of the world. That was written by Sukarno, who was the president of Indonesia. Talk about him in a second. What Sukarno was advocating was a unification around anti-colonialism, that the world should not be a plaything of one small clique, and that would be the globalists who are running our country and the British Empire. That's who he's talking about, because Indonesia was a Dutch colony, and Sukarno was a freedom fighter who was jailed by the Dutch, freed by the Japanese. He used the Japanese to organize a nationalist movement in Indonesia. When the Japanese were defeated, the Dutch went back into Indonesia and tried to recolonize it. They must have not read the Atlantic Charter. They didn't sign it like Churchill. They wanted that mining back. They wanted those mines, those natural resources back. And of course, the British wanted them to do it, and I'm going to tell you why. There's a reason why there was a colonization of Indonesia, because it's geostrategic. But Sukarno fought for the freedom of the people. Indonesia is the largest Muslim population country in the world. I think it's 350 Muslims. It's almost a centrist country. It is not a radical country. It has a beautiful growing economy. It's under threat right now by the World Economic Forum. They're trying to bring it under heel. Sukarno was president for 20 years. Guess what? The CIA and MI6 deposed him in the mid-'60s. There's a great movie called The Year of Living Dangerously, starring Mel Gibson. It's a great historical movie about a time and a place that needs to be remembered. Because what happened due to the actions of the CIA, that would be we the people we pay, our spooks, right? They didn't want to have a nationalist, Sukarno, running Indonesia, because Indonesia is very strategic globally. So they deposed him, put a military general in place. It was a bloody coup, and as many as 1 million Indonesians were killed in the Year of Living Dangerously in a coup funded by we the people. That's who our CIA is. Hey, 1 million people. I want to swear again. You know what I want to say. Say it yourself. F these people. That's 1 million human beings they killed. And why did they do it? Because Indonesia has a strait. There's a strait called the Strait of Malacca. Now, the Strait of Malacca is part of what's called the Maritime Silk Road. Now, listen to this. You're going to like this because you're going to understand what we're dealing with. The Maritime Silk Road runs from the Chinese coast towards the southern tip of India to Mombasa. From there, through the Red Sea, via the Suez Canal to the Mediterranean, there to the upper Adriatic region, to the northern Italian hub of Trieste, with its rail connections to Central Europe and the North Sea. Over 94,000 vessels pass through the strait each year, making it the busiest strait in the world, carrying about 25% of the world's traded goods. I guess you'd have to say that the British and the Dutch had an interest in controlling Indonesia because that Malacca Strait is part of the escape route that the Crown used to rob China and get those ill-gotten gains back to the crown's vaults. Rothschild, now dead. Of course, there's another Rothschild coming up. And get back over there and steal more as quickly as possible. Of course, bringing drugs and making the Chinese people dependent. Nice people, okay, nice. And of course, our CIA is in on it because it went from being the British Empire to the Anglo-American Empire. And that's what these people in the Republican Party that are conservatives want to continue to support. They don't realize they're in a cult, that they've been brainwashed. None of this stuff matters to our country. We don't care about it. We just don't care. It's not our fight. Our country was established to get away from these materialist, Darwinist assholes and to set up a process of self-governance instead of being ruled by kings and queens and colonialists. And we've given that up. We've just given it up, and we've given it up because these people very systematically penetrated our academic institutions and brainwashed our children. So our children are all cultists. And they think the people that want to self-govern were cultists. And there are some strange folks over here on our side of the football, but we've got to love them. They're American citizens. They need love, education, conversation, respect, just listening to people. Here's another thing. I do this all the time. I mean, I'm way out there on point. So a lot of times when I talk to people, we're not in the same place. I don't tell them that. I listen. And those of you that are communicating with me know I answer. Now, I get a lot of correspondence, so sometimes my answer is quick. But what I'm doing is respecting your effort to communicate. And if we would all respect the efforts of our fellow citizens to communicate with us, don't label, don't judge, don't use the word you. Leave the word you out of it. I don't even want to use the word we. These are cognitive distortions. I make I statements, how I feel. I can't speak for you. I don't want to speak for you. And I certainly don't want to manipulate you. I'm telling and sharing what I think, what I believe, and what are the fruits of my research. And for those of the listeners and viewers that like it, they come back. Please bring somebody with you. Please. We're trying to build a community. Please go to X, follow me at Prof. Penn Podcast. And for all of you that are doing it, thank you. I'm on Getter. I'm trying to be active on Getter. Please follow me there at the Professor Penn Podcast. Let's do something spectacular together. Let's change things. But let's keep talking about unity because that's how we're going to get something done is through unity. Listen to this one. Fascism is a religion. The 20th century will be known in history as the century of fascism. Fascism is a religion. Isn't that interesting? Boy, that's interesting. Politics and religion. Who said it? Benito Mussolini. Doesn't have the greatest residual reputation. So I got a counterpoint by a reformed jihadist named Majid Nawaz. He's living in England. Pretty well known. Unity in faith is theocracy. Unity in politics is fascism. So Majid Nawaz is advocating for many different street corners to look at problems from such that we can learn from each other. He doesn't believe in a theocratic form of government. Like many people can have Protestants, good. Catholics, good. Jews, good. Muslims, good. A whole range of religions that are good. Good for people. Bring about well-being in the people. To the extent that these religions can bring about well-being, that's a tremendous thing. He's saying, great, let's have different perspectives. And when we have unity in politics, where everybody believes the same thing, we got fascism. So of course I'm happy to have people that don't agree with me. I respect them. I want to learn from them. I go out with people that don't agree with me all the time. I get a little theatrical here because we got a lot of problems. But when I actually sit down with someone that doesn't agree with me, I'm not threatened by that. I appreciate what they have to share with me. I ask them to. Here's a great one by a great novelist and philosopher, Hermann Hesse. Wisdom is nothing but a preparation of the soul, a capacity, a secret art of thinking, feeling, and breathing, thoughts of unity at every moment of life. So there's Hermann Hesse bringing back the idea that a unity is found in some kind of spiritual becoming. But then we got the other street corner from a first-hand jerk-off, Bertrand Russell, who I've critiqued on this podcast many times. He was hugely influential as a philosopher of science and as a spokesman for the New World Order in the 20th century, from about 1920 up till I think he died in the mid-70s, I think. Maybe it was the 80s. Lived a long time. The guy was an ass, but he was revered. He was an atheist, and that was a very atheistic time. It was, after the Holocaust, and people lost their faith. So Bertrand Russell says, when I say he's a first-hand jerk, this guy was smart. He was cutting the rug, right? The rest of these people are just studying what he said. This guy made up things, new ideas. Listen to this one. Order, unity, and continuity are human inventions just as truly as catalogs and encyclopedias. So from Bertrand Russell's street corner, unity is made up. He doesn't see unity as being a spiritual process of becoming. He doesn't believe in that. So he says, made up, bullshit. Okay, great. Let me give you the counterpoint to that one. It's in Ephesians chapter 4. Make every effort to keep the unity of spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. So these are different views of unity. And the theme that I'm resonating with as personally is when one finds the spiritual path, one sees unity. The unity of all things is revealed. When we get off the materialist path, where we're so threatened, because of course if we're materialists, it's one and done, right? So, your most precious resource is staying alive, so that's a competition. Then since there's no spiritual elevation, it's how much money you make. See, this is what's wrong with these conservatives. They're so impressed with their 401ks that they forget about the suffering amongst the people. That would make them not Christians, even if they profess to be so, because what Christianity is essentially is love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might, the first great commandment. And the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. And if we're not operationalizing that in our lives, we haven't really gone too far on the Christian walk or in that spiritual investigation. And that's why I'm doing this with you, because I am loving you as I love myself, sharing with you everything that I can, because this is the place where I find myself put. And I'm giving it everything I have, and I thank you for appreciating me. I get great feedback that is uplifting. Now, I don't need a lot of pats on the back. I have to admit I like it. It's better than having people say, hey, asshole. But, it's nice for me in my life to be able to share the fruits of all my labor, particularly with a young audience. My biggest cohort is 25 to 35, and nobody talked to me when I was 25 years old like this. I wish they had. I had to figure it out on my own. So if I can help, it's great, and that's me loving you. So thank you for being here. Let's talk about some of the people that don't love us. That's the news. So, news that matters since I saw you last. Iran, which is in the crosshairs of the Anglo-American cartel and their forward-firing base Israel, has told their proxies to cool it because they're feeling a little bit nervous now. There's carrier battle groups in the region. Clearly, Israelis want to throw down, and they're saying, hey, we could get clipped out here. Maybe we pushed this a little too far. Hootie and the Blowfish, could you please back down? But see, the Iranians don't really have control like we think they do. Because all these groups are, guess what? Self-governing. They have their own ideas. So the Houthis are continuing to shoot at ships, missiles, hitting ships, cutting undersea cables. That's escalating. And every night, no longer makes the news, but every night, either the British or the American fighter planes go off into the skies and drop bombs all over Yemen. They don't even report it anymore. Why should they? They're just turning the inventory. Hey, get that purchase order book. We need some more bombs. War is a racket, right? But every night they're killing Yemenis. Great. So they're pissed, and they're continuing to try to close down that Red Sea. And, of course, this war is going on in Gaza. That's not a cool thing. That's getting worse and worse. Now, there actually is peace talks going on. Peace talks being something to bring about an end to the violence. And we'll see if we get there. We'll see if we get there. But Iran is trying to make it mellow out. There is an effort to bring an end to the war in the Gaza. But all the while, things are getting darker and darker. The Washington Times, which is a secondary newspaper in Washington, D.C., still spooky. I don't trust anything they say, but I'll share with you what they reported this past week. They reported that Iran already has 6 nuclear weapons, and they clearly have the missiles to deliver them, and that they will have dozens more in a few months. Oh, do you know that our Congress passed a resolution that under no circumstance, a resolution that means the House, the Senate, and the President all agreed that there would be no way, no how that Iran would ever get a nuclear weapon, and the United States was committed to stopping them by any means necessary. So put that in your pipe and smoke it tonight and see how that makes you feel. We're in a period right now that I would call very similar to what was named the Phony War. The Phony War was an 8-month period at the start of World War II, during which there was only limited military land operations on the Western Front. There was a lot of jockeying for position. They called it the Phony War. Didn't last long, 8 months. 8 months, that's as long as it lasted. And that's what's going on in Europe right now. The Russians are deploying troops. They're doubling the number of troops that are stationed along the border with the Baltic states. The Ukrainians are massing troops on the Belarusian border. The NATO allies have announced that they're going to create a Maginot Line that runs the whole border with Russia. There's a lot of, getting ready to get down. A lot of it. It's a phony war. It's the preparation for war. Everybody's getting into position. And what do? Well, it's just like in the phony war. In the phony war, citizens went about their daily business as if nothing had changed, but they knew there was that nagging feeling that something very radical and cataclysmic was soon to happen. I have that feeling. Do you? For those of us that answered ourselves in the affirmative, that something cataclysmic is about to happen, it does not have to. If the American citizens rise up, take control of the political process, and vote for peace, peace we shall have. If the American citizens continue to trade away their freedom for material high and security, we're going to war, and life's going to change. It's up to us. It's not up to anybody but us. And here's another part of the phony war. In this aid package that eventually is going to pass, my prediction, they'll get it through Congress because, how can they get in the way, right? I mean, eventually, they're going to get this $90 billion to fund these wars. My opinion, I'd like the Republicans to stand strong. Stand strong, nationalists. I don't want to be a fortune teller. I'm just beat down by the other caving in that has happened over the course of time. Maybe this is a time we'll stand up. We'll see. But in that bill is $14 billion for Israel because Israel is being prepared to fight a multi-front war. That's a multi-front war. They got this one war going on down in Gaza right now, and I got to tell you, there's been 29,313 Palestinians killed, 2/3 of which are women and children. That's a lot of people to get killed in a few months. I think we lost, what did we lose, 60,000 American soldiers in Vietnam over 11 years, something like that, 60 or 80. So we got 30,000 Palestinians killed in a few months. Hey, this is a killing war. This is not a kidding around war. And, the Palestinians blame America. That's just the way it is. So they're preparing for the war, getting funded for the war, and Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz, kind of sounds like a gangster, doesn't it? Benny Three Fingers Gantz has threatened that Israel will invade Rafah, where there's 1.5 million Palestinians, before Ramadan, which starts on March 10th, unless Hamas doesn't release all the remaining Israeli prisoners, the captives. Set the captives free, right? Well, we're going to see. March 10th's in about 12 days. We're going to see. Because I don't think he's kidding around. I think if they don't release those prisoners, those captives, they're going to go into Rafah. And then we're going to see another 30,000 Palestinians killed. And all the while, more money keeps accruing to the military-industrial complex. Lockheed Martin is going to increase production of the HIMARS. What's a HIMAR? A HIMAR is a mobile artillery rocket system. High mobility. Moves around great, kills great, and they're up in the production. They're going to up the production by 60% because it costs a lot of money to buy a HIMAR. So who's benefiting from this? The people that own stock in the military-industrial complex. That's what this is all about. That's what my country is doing. I'm not happy about it. Please bring people to the podcast. Please go to X. Please help us build a peace movement, an anti-war movement. We need it desperately. There's nobody in the streets protesting. Susan will lead us. We need to get out in the streets. I could keep going. I'm going to run out of time. There's even, the news gets worse and worse. I'll leave some for next Tuesday. God willing, we'll all be here. Just to give you a quick update on the tire business, because it's emblematic and a good case study of our country. The numbers were just published on the domestic tire business. Half of the tires that were bought and sold in the United States this last year were imported, and half were produced domestically. So we've offshored 50% of our tire demand. 50%, which means if things break down, hey, you're going to be walking, baby. You're going to be walking. This is not going to be a segue into TireGet.com today, because I find myself in a serious mood. We're actually building half of our supply offshore. This is in every industry or worse. Like in the high tech, electronics business, there's nothing left in the United States. Textiles, nothing left in the United States. Furniture, very little left in the United States. We've sent these industries overseas, and the net result of that is we got a lot of unemployed people. Our secondhand jerk-offs believe that if you and me are buying things cheaper at Walmart, we're not going to care about our cousin who hasn't had a job in 5 years. And I reject that. I think all of us need employment. Roy said something really insightful at the SD45 caucus last night when he was speaking to the crowd, because he knew it was a very military-industrial complex crowd. And he said, hey, if you're for empire, I get it. I understand it. I get it. You're for empire. But if you're for empire, we got to build stuff here. Pretty obvious, isn't it? I want to move on to something that's widely reported in conservative media. And I'm going to believe that a lot of you are familiar with this. But this is so important, I'm going to play the whole speech. There is a president of El Salvador. His name is Nayib Bukele. He's very young. He was born in 1981. He's a young man, beautiful young man. Interestingly, his paternal grandparents were Palestinian Christians. If you're a Palestinian Christian, talk about going back to the way back. That would mean you might have been converted from being Jewish to being Christian at the time of Christ. This man, if you look at him, has very strong energy, very centered. Almost like in Star Wars when they said Anakin had a lot of midichlorians. This guy is in the line of faith. And he was a leftist, snuck in there as a leftist, smart. And they threw him out of the party because he wasn't quite a leftist. And he started a new party called Nuevo Ideas Party. And he got elected a few years ago with 53% of the vote. And this guy threw the New World Order out of his country. The NGOs, out. IMF, out. This is where MS-13 is headquartered, which is this terrible gang we're dealing with. On one night, he arrested 72,000 gang members and imprisoned them. Took them off the streets. So, of course, the Washington Post and the New York Times said, oh, he's a dictator. Well, yeah, for them, because he's throwing them out. He's not going to let the second-hand jerk-offs run his country into the ground. They've destroyed the New World Order, and this man stood up in front of a CPAC convention and gave an incredible speech. Now, the population of this country, El Salvador, is only about 7 million people, and their GDP is only about $32 billion. So it's like a small state. It's easier to do things in a small state. But it's a model for how things need to be pursued here in the United States of America. So I'm going to play this entire speech. It's 25 minutes and 47 seconds. We need to steep ourselves in this. If you haven't heard of it, welcome to a possible future. If you've seen it before, like I have, we'll enjoy it again. Can you please cue that up and play it through?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gracias. Thank you. Gracias, muchas gracias. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Let's have a seat. Thank you. Let's have a seat. Thank you. I love you too. Dear Matt and Mercy, thank you for the kind invitation to have me here at CPAC. It is truly an honor to be here just a few days after our presidential and legislative elections. Which, by the way, they pulverized the opposition.
Yes.
They say globalism comes to die at CPAC. I'm here to tell you that in El Salvador, it's already dead. But if you want globalism to die here too, you must be willing to unapologetically fight against everything and everyone that stands for it. Fight for your freedoms. Fight for your rights. The next president of the United States must not only win an election, he must have the vision, the will, and the courage to do whatever it takes. And above all, he must be able to identify the underlying forces that will conspire against him. These dark forces are already taking over your country. You may not see it yet, but it's already happening. You don't see it as clearly because people are designed to see linear changes, not exponential ones. We don't always recognize how fast a problem can multiply and spiral out of control. The problem is much like the metaphor of the boiling frog. Once the water boils, it's already too late. People fail to see these things. It's our nature. Just like the frog, people become complacent, and they don't realize how bad things are getting until it's too late. While I know, of course, El Salvador is a lot smaller country, setting aside the differences, there's a similarity with what is happening here in the United States. We also had many apparently isolated problems in the 60s and the 70s, and we failed to realize as a country the severity of them until it became a civil war. By the time we reacted, it was already too late. We were already boiled like the frog. And it took us 50 years, 2 wars, 250,000 lives, and a third of our population displaced, and a near miracle to get our country back.
And you!
As your friend, I want to issue this warning so you don't make the same mistakes we did in the 60s and the 70s. It is not easy to pull yourself back once you're in boiling water. In fact, all the experts said it was impossible. And besides, you don't want to wait 50 years and maybe hope for a miracle to get out of hell. You can still jump before the water boils. Some might say I'm exaggerating, but we can clearly see the signs of a declining society because our own hit rock bottom decades ago. It's like when we see someone getting sick. First, it's maybe just stomachache, or a headache, or a small fever. But if you don't deal with the disease, it will only get worse, and then it may be too late. Even after our first war in El Salvador, we failed again to look into the signs of the second civil war that was coming, the gang war. After 1 million people fled the first war, a lot of them came to live in ghettos here in the United States, where the gangs were formed. When former President Clinton deported a lot of those gang members without telling us they were gang members, they were criminals. They roamed free and recruited young people, thousands of young Salvadorans, to join the gangs. At first, they seemed like petty criminals, but they began to change and transform until they became the unscrupulous terrorists that we know today. Most of them even perform satanic rituals, and this has been well documented. The government back then didn't deal with the disease, nor did the next administration, nor did the ones after that. The disease that had begun with mild symptoms got worse and worse. It became a cancer that seemed incurable. We are already seeing these symptoms in the United States. Big cities in decline like Baltimore, Portland, New York, just to name a few. Places where crime and drugs have become the daily norm, and even accepted and promoted by the government. How many young people have you lost to the streets of Philadelphia or San Francisco, to fentanyl? Did we see these apocalyptic sights 15, 10, 5 years ago? Can you imagine how it will be in the next 5, 10, or 15 years? The same thing was happening in El Salvador. In the span of less than a decade, gangs took control of all the country and our society. They evolved into a parallel government, controlling elections and even political parties. Every aspect of the daily life of most people was controlled by the gangs. Murder capital of the world is a tragic title to hold. Getting rid of that was the bare minimum we had to achieve in order to even start thinking about rebuilding our country. But jumping out of the water when it's already boiling is an almost impossible feat. You are not there yet. And believe me, you don't want to be. We did the unthinkable to cleanse our society. We arrested the terrorists, but we have to remove corrupt judges and corrupt attorneys and prosecutors. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. These corrupt judges and prosecutors were setting the gang members free.
And Nancy Pelosi.
And it wasn't just the gangs. The corrupt system worked in tandem with the so-called international community, the NGOs, and of course the fake news, just like it happens here in the United States. Unelected bureaucrats are trying to instate public policy. Who elected them? They don't have a democratic mandate. If they want a seat in the table, they should run for office. Let the people vote. It will not be a pretty sight for them if the elections are free and fair. I mean, who elected Soros to dictate public policy and laws? Why does he feel entitled to impose his agenda? Let me tell you something. Soros and his cronies hit a brick wall in El Salvador. Thank God, and all the glory be to him, Salvadorans are now immune to his influence. No one believes his lies anymore over there. We just had free and fair elections. And we won in a landslide with more than 84% of the vote. Let that sink in. More than 84% of the people voted to continue our policies. Our victory is unprecedented in the history and modern democracies in the world. They also gave us a supermajority in Congress, more than that. 54 seats out of 60. $57 if we count our allies. That's 95% of Congress. Let that also sink in. The people of El Salvador have woken up, and so can you. The global elites, they hate our success, and they fear yours. The people's free will to choose their leaders is something they despise because they cannot control that. You have experienced this firsthand here in the United States. The global elites control the mainstream media. They finance campaigns, district attorneys, to mention a few. They abuse their powers. They persecute political opponents. In El Salvador, we don't weaponize our judicial system to persecute our political opponents. A practice that may sound familiar to you, but we don't do that there. And who's the dictator? The global elites in the media, they work in conjunction, they run some stories and publish them, same pictures to reinforce their agendas. You're no strangers to that here in the United States. We deal with that in El Salvador too. That is the free press that they talk about? Please. I always criticize the defenders of institutionalism. Not because I don't think strong institutions are paramount and necessary for a democracy, but because I find them very hypocritical. They don't seem to have the same standards for themselves as they are trying to impose on others. But there's yet another component that is more dangerous than a simple double standard. Institutions were created to serve the people, and not the other way around. Somewhere along the way, those people forgot their fundamental purpose, which is more important than the institution itself. When the judicial system was created, it was created out of the necessity to bring justice. But now, it seems like survival and control of the judges, of the AGs, among others, are paramount. And the need to bring justice is merely a little more than an afterthought. Another example, the police was created to bring law and order. Let them seek law and order then. But now some of them are even afraid to do their job because they fear the consequences for doing it. They should be encouraged to fulfill their foundational roles without fear of repercussions that distract them from their missions. If the police was created to bring law and order, let them bring law and order. If the judicial system was created to bring justice, let them bring justice. Let them protect their purpose at all costs. Same goes with the press. Let them be free. A democracy needs a free press. But to enjoy that membership, you must adhere to your duty as a reporter. Report the facts. Don't be a puppet of those who finance you or finance the organizations that you work for. Your freedom of speech will always be protected. We believe in free speech. Everyone here believes in free speech. Your free speech will always be protected. But don't call yourself a journalist if you're just an activist. Yes. Don't call yourself independent if you depend in open society. Sarah's NGO for those sacred institutions have morphed away from the reason they were created. We should not defend those institutions for the sake of being institutions. Instead, we should defend the principles that created those institutions in the first place. It's troubling to see that this is happening everywhere. Not only in El Salvador and the United States, it's happening everywhere. But even here, in the United States, in the most powerful country in the world, even here, it's happening. America should listen to these words, not because the El Salvador model should be replicated here, but because these specific examples apply to any nation that has lost or is losing its way. Ask yourself why this is happening, who is supporting it, and whether it's by ignorance or by choice. And fight it. Fight it with all your heart and soul. And be the beacon of hope. And be the beacon of hope that your founding fathers, with all their faults like every human being has, dreamt for your country. Fight for your freedoms, for your rights. Fight for the original purpose of these institutions and not their mere existence. It's still not too late. It can be done. It is time to erase these new paradigms that have been imposed in the recent years that make no sense. If you just free your minds from those invisible chains, you could do it. This shift is an extremely dangerous trend that undermines these institutions. Effectiveness and their credibility is at stake, both home and abroad. This is a warning from a friend. You should adhere to their foundational principles and purposes and denounce this new institutionalism. Now, you would think that's it, as it wasn't enough, right? But unfortunately, there's more. There are other symptoms that are even more difficult to diagnose. For instance, the financial situation of the United States. When I talk to my conservative friends right here, they always tell me that the problem is high taxes. But they're wrong. Of course, high taxes are extremely high here in the United States. I give you that. You're right in that. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is not the high taxes themselves, but the fact that they are not even really funding the government. Not even those high taxes, higher than a lot of places in the world, not even those taxes are really funding the government. So who's financing the government? Government is financed by treasury bonds, paper. And who buys the treasury bonds? Mostly the Fed. And how does the Fed buy them? By printing money. But what backing does the Fed have for that money being printed? The treasury bonds themselves. So basically, you finance the government by printing money out of thin air. Someone could ask, well, so if the government can print the limited amounts of money out of thin air, why do they collect taxes? I mean, in theory, it would make sense, right? If they can print unlimited amounts of money, why would they need taxes for? The answer is simple, but it's very shocking. The real problem is that you pay high taxes only to uphold the illusion that you are funding the government, which you are not. It's shocking, but it's true. The government is funded by money printing, paper backed with paper, a bubble that will inevitably burst. The situation is even worse than it seems, because if most Americans and the rest of the world were to become aware of this farce, confidence in your currency would be lost, the dollar would fall, and the Western civilization with it. If the next president of the United States doesn't make the necessary policies and structural changes, sooner or later that bubble will burst. There's still time. You don't have to make the same mistakes we did in the 60s and the 70s. You can still jump before the water boils. Winning the election isn't enough to solve these problems. They will not simply go away as a consequence of an electoral result. It would take a total re-engineering of the government top to bottom. It will entail making difficult decisions, like the ones we made in El Salvador since 2019 and they're already paying off. It will be hard. The system will push back, but you have the right to determine your own fate. Salvadorans did the same. The decision for the direction of our nation was ours, and it continues to be ours. We didn't tolerate being told what to do. In doing so, we did the unthinkable. Against all adversity, we transformed El Salvador from the most dangerous country in the world to the safest in the Western Hemisphere. Thank you. Thank you. We did it by defying the global elites. We told them no more. And that is my message to you. Put up the fight, because it is, in the end, it will be worth it. It has been for us, and you will have your country back. May God bless you. May God bless the people of the United States. May God bless El Salvador and the future of both our nations. Thank you very much.
Every time I listen to this, it's just so simple. I mean, you just laid out the whole program. Go back and listen to it again. Share it with other people. We're in an information war. We must understand we're being overrun systematically by global elites who are using communism to undermine all of the institutions in all of the history of our country. And we got them right in our Congress, and sometimes they appear in disguises. Here's a prick, U.S. Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi. Now, Mississippi didn't ratify this, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 till like 1994. So, Mississippi, and in fact, in the Professor Penn world, when I put on my tire business hat, we don't do business in Mississippi. Give you an idea about Mississippi. But he's the highest ranking Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And he just released a white paper, and he says, here's his statement, which was released right after, the House voted against the $90 billion to grift off of these wars. My primary obligation as a U.S. Senator is protecting America. Okay, we could unpack that sentence, but I want to get to the scam. The national defense legislation counters the Biden administration's weak defense policy decisions and will save American lives. More bullshit. Listen to this one. This is the core of the scam. The United States economy also stands to gain as much as 75% of the bill's funding, including the $59 billion for weapons production. The bill ensures our military readiness and ability to confront and to collective national security threats from China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. The United States economy also stands to gain as 75% of the bill's funding will go to Americans, including $59 billion for weapons production. I'm going to do it a third time. The United States economy also stands to gain as 75% of the bill's funding will go to Americans, including $59 billion for weapons production. That's the scam. So the gang member can appear as an MS-13 tatted up murderer or a U.S. Senator from Mississippi. They're the same person. They're robbing us. And they're justifying it by saying that the gang activity of piracy, the killing of other human beings, is justified because the U.S. economy also stands to gain as 75% of the bill's funding will go to Americans, including $59 billion for weapons production. What Americans? What Americans are going to get this money? Because those are the gang members, those are the globalists, those are the tatted up assholes that are destroying our country. Right out of our Senate, we have these people. So just because they dress in suits and speak English without swearing does not mean they're not complete, total assholes. So our country is now divided into three groups: the leftists, the conservatives, and the nationalists. The conservatives seem to reject the nationalists, which makes them leftists. So guess what? Dugan was right. And what is a leftist? It's a materialist. Doesn't have any grounding in a spiritual life, has no spiritual borders, views humanity as inventory, has given themselves over to the business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, and they only care about themselves. Now, I've said this many times. The great philosopher Maimonides, if I do not care about myself, who will care for me? But if I only care for myself, what am I? That's what we're dealing with. We've got to find a better balance between narcissistic self-interest and boundarylessness. There has to be a medium point. And when I say that, let me try that again. Narcissistic self-interest, your world is you. The boundary is you. You may not have any spiritual boundaries, but your only concern is yourself. That's it. And then being so not self-concerned that you can't even take care of yourself. Somewhere in here, in this oscillating reality, is a balance point that needs information from spiritual insight, where we can balance out our country, get away from this business model, get away from the materialism that justifies such a horrifying abuse of the American people. But we elect them. We keep them in power, and we benefit from the materialism and the security that they allegedly give us in return for our freedom. No more. Bukele laid it right out for us. We got to take these people on. It's worth doing the work. We've got to eject the globalists. We got to win elections. We got to arrest the criminals. We got to get rid of the secondhand jerk-offs that are brainwashing the people. We got to redo every institution. We are not saying we are not believing in institutions. We want to refresh these institutions so that they function for the well-being of the American people. I want to thank you for joining me. We're going to go out with some beautiful music. I got deep into it today. I'm upset by what I see, and sometimes I just get overwhelmed by it. I just go, shit, this is goofy that we have let these people into the camp in the first place. So how do we do it? We reclaim our own personal spiritual boundaries first. That's the first step. Inside strong. And this is what it looks like when you're inside strong. We're going to go out with a little bit of the Sibelius violin concerto, something that shows us what humanity is capable and destined to do. Thanks very much. I'll see you next week.